Have you ever said, I just don't feel like myself anymore? I hear women say versions of this all the time. Sometimes I say it. I don't feel like the woman I used to be. I don't enjoy the same things. I don't have the same energy. I don't know what I want anymore. I don't feel as social. I don't feel as ambitious. I don't feel as patient. I don't feel as confident. I used to be more fun. I used to be more driven. I used to be able to handle so much more. And then usually comes the conclusion. I need to find myself again. But I've been wondering whether that is always the right question. Because what if you haven't lost yourself? What if you've changed? Welcome to the Primal Priestess, where intuition, embodiment, and ancient wisdom meet modern life. This month, we're talking about re-entry to self. Week 1 asked, when did you stop knowing what you want? Week 2 asked, how long have you been putting yourself off? And this week, I want to look at something deeper. The idea that when we no longer recognize ourselves, something must be wrong. We tend to imagine identity as though there is one true version of us somewhere underneath everything. And if we become disconnected, exhausted, overwhelmed, busy, changed, or uncertain, the job is to somehow get back to her, back to the woman you were before the kids, before the business, before the relationship, before the divorce, before the burnout, before your body changed, before you got older, before something happened that changed our priorities, before you knew what you know now. But why do we assume the earlier version was the truest one? That woman belonged to a different season. She had different information, different responsibilities, different hopes, different fears, different relationships, different boundaries, a different body, a different nervous system, different experiences, different awarenesses. Of course, you are not exactly the same. And yet, women can spend years comparing themselves against a previous version of who they were. I used to have more energy. I used to be spontaneous. I used to go out all the time. I used to work 12-hour days and be fine. I used to want this. I used to love doing that. I used to be more easygoing. And sometimes those observations are useful, but sometimes I used to becomes a quiet form of self-rejection, not to mention a drain of your energy. Because underneath it is, why can't I still be her? And maybe the answer is because you are not supposed to be. Not every change is growth. Not every identity shift is automatically healthy. There are times when depression, chronic stress, illness, trauma, hormonal changes, grief, burnout, or other physical and emotional factors deserve real attention and appropriate support. But there are also times when discomfort comes simply because the person you were has become too small for the person you are becoming. And those two experiences can feel surprisingly similar. Both can sound like, I don't recognize myself. So the question becomes, am I disconnected from myself, or am I unfamiliar with myself? And those are not necessarily the same thing. Disconnection says, I can't feel myself. Unfamiliarity says, I'm meeting a version of myself I haven't learned yet. And I think this is especially relevant for women because so much of female identity is tied to role: daughter, wife, mother, caregiver, professional, business owner, partner, friend, the responsible one, the strong one, the easygoing one, the one everyone can count on, the healer, the fixer, the achiever. And don't get me wrong, roles can be useful. They give structure. They help us understand where we belong. But they can also become identities that we continue performing long after something inside us has changed. Maybe you were always the woman who said yes. Now you want more space. Maybe you were always the ambitious one. Now success means something different. Maybe you built an identity around being needed. Now you're exhausted by being needed. Maybe you were the social one. Now your nervous system craves quiet. Maybe you were proud of how much you could tolerate, and now tolerance no longer feels like strength. Maybe you used to believe being a good woman meant keeping everyone comfortable. Now you are beginning to understand that honesty sometimes creates discomfort. That can feel like losing yourself, but maybe you're losing a role. Maybe you're losing an expectation. Maybe you're losing an identity that once protected you or helped you belong. And there can be grief in that, even when the change is right. We don't talk enough about grieving identity. Sometimes you miss the woman you used to be. Even if you know you can't return to her, you miss her energy, her innocence, her certainty, her body, her relationships, confidence, her ability to tolerate things you no longer want to tolerate. You can love who you're becoming and still grieve who you've been. Those truths can coexist. But I think the danger comes when nostalgia becomes instruction, when missing an old version of yourself becomes evidence that you are supposed to recreate her. Because maybe she did her job. Maybe she got you here. And maybe now something different is required. This is where identity becomes deeply spiritual to me. Not because there is some perfect spiritual self we need to uncover, but because spiritual practice can invite us into honesty. Who am I when I stop performing who I've always been? What matters to me now? What feels true now? What feels heavy? What am I no longer willing to pretend about? What am I still doing because it matches my identity, even though it no longer matches my truth? That's a different way of approaching finding myself. You don't have to hunt for the woman you lost. You can begin observing the woman who is already here. Notice what she prefers now. Notice what she doesn't tolerate anymore. Notice where her energy goes. Notice where she feels alive. Notice where she contracts, the conversations she no longer wants to have, what she wants more of, what she's becoming curious about, what no longer impresses her, what matters more than it used to. That is identity too. And perhaps part of maturity is allowing your identity to remain alive, not fixed, not rigid, not trapped by decisions you made 10 years ago about who you were supposed to be. There is a question I want you to sit with this week, and feel free to comment below so that we can support you. But what am I still expecting myself to be that may no longer be true? And for me, it's maybe portraying the societal image of what a doctor should look like. Even though I'm a mom and a business owner and I'm trying to work out, meditate, get videos done, and then come in and work on patients. So sometimes I give myself a hard time about what I'm wearing, but you know what? Those are just standards set by society that I don't necessarily have to subscribe to anymore. But for you, maybe you're still expecting yourself to be endlessly available, or maybe you're expecting yourself to be ambitious in a way that no longer feels meaningful. You're expecting yourself to want the same relationship dynamic, the same friendships, the same career, the same lifestyle, the same body, the same schedule, the same spiritual practices, the same dreams. Maybe those things still belong to you. Maybe they don't. You don't need to make dramatic decisions today. The point is not to blow up your life every time you evolve. The point is to become honest enough to notice evolution when it happens. Because August is a season of rebuilding. Schedules come back, routines come back, commitments come back. Fall begins asking us, what are we doing next? And this is exactly why I think identity matters right now. Before you automatically rebuild a life around who you've always been, pause. Is that still who you are? And if you don't know that yet, that doesn't mean you're lost. You may simply be in the space between identities. The old one no longer fully fits, but the new one isn't completely formed. And that space can be uncomfortable, but it can also be honest. You don't have to rush through it. You don't have to name yourself immediately. You don't have to become a brand new woman by September. You can simply become curious. What is changing? What is emerging? What am I releasing? What feels more true than it used to? And what have I been trying to force myself back into simply because it is familiar? Maybe finding yourself isn't the assignment. Maybe the assignment is allowing yourself to meet who you are now. If this conversation resonated with you, stay with me through the August Reentry to Self series. We're exploring what happens when women begin listening to themselves again, responding to their own needs, questioning outdated identities, and becoming more conscious about the lives they're actively creating. And if you're feeling physically, emotionally, or energetically stuck and need an additional tool or just want an additional tool for exploring patterns, send us a message. We also do quest for bioenergetic remote scans that can give you areas of blockages in your life. If you need that additional support, that tool is here. But this week, don't pressure yourself to answer, who am I? Start here. What am I still expecting myself to be that may no longer be true? Sometimes knowing yourself again begins by releasing the requirement to remain who you've always been. Please like, subscribe, and until next time, trust yourself a little deeper, soften into your truth, and remember who you are beneath the noise.